Hey friend, what would that mean for the way that you show up in your life, for your relationships with God, with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers? What would that mean for all these different areas of your life if you could and actually follow through? Sorry about that. We had a little feed broadcast interruption there. Hopefully it didn't make too much of a mess with the video. But I want to let you know that I am here to talk to you about conquering your fears so that you can follow through with God's plan. And if you are ready to say enough is enough and shed the masks that keep you from being the woman that God created and calls you to be, then you are in the right place, my friend. This is Women Created and Called Live, and we are going to have lots of fun along the way as we learn more about ourselves and what it takes to actually conquer those fears. So, welcome, beautiful friend. This is episode 0. So what that means is that this is the very first one, even before number 1. And this is a chance for us to get the bugs out and also to sort of talk about logistics, kind of set things up for what's coming up in the coming weeks for the foreseeable future, every week, here on Women Created and Called Live. So I am your guide on this journey, Beth McGrain-Tran, and today we are, along with all those logistic stuff, today we are going to be chatting about why are we here? Now, yes, I do mean that in multiple ways. I mean both, why are we here in this life? Why are we here on this earth, in this country, in this city, in this family? Why are you here in this day, in this moment? Those are some big questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're also going to talk about why are we here having this podcast? What's the point? So those are some of the things we're going to be addressing today. Now, here is a problem that I see in the world. I see that so many of us have this deep desire to actually to love others, to sometimes people say, I just want to be a good person. I want to do good in the world. And many of us will also say, the whole thing that I want is to be a saint. And that is awesome. But then because of our fallen nature and because, well, life gets in the way often, we see that we come up short. And some of this is caused by wounds from our past experiences. And like we're talking about in this podcast, our fears. And it's so interesting because no matter what it looks like the reasons are for us falling short of our intentions, or, we're getting into the follow through part, right? Or, no matter what the reasons are, very often there is some kind of fear that is hanging out underneath all of that other stuff that's on top. So we're going to be talking about that a lot. So why is it a problem that we have these hearts to do good, but we're always coming up short? Well, here's what that can turn into. Our beautiful desire to love can actually become disordered and turn into things like people pleasing, like fear of failure, because we're trying to get it right. We're trying to do things perfectly all the time. It can turn into self-sabotage. It can turn into self-loathing. It can turn into stress and anxiety. And all of these things can add up to create very disconnected relationships. So that's a big problem. So how do we solve that problem? I'm going to get to that in just a second. But first, I want to share with you a little bit of my story in relation to this problem. So about a little over a year ago, I discovered what coaching is. Life coaching. My first real encounter with it was through business coaching, but also leadership training. And then I have had some wonderful different coaches along the way. And so I've had a nice, almost like a well-rounded experience of receiving coaching and also giving coaching. And it has been wonderful. So this kind of began a journey of seeing that I have these patterns of people pleasing and realize that my patterns of not following through and of being disorganized and, maybe showing up late often and all of these things, these patterns of my past were not actually the real me. And when I say the real me, I mean the woman that God created me to be. All of those behavioral patterns are layers on top of the real me that was underneath. And so coaching actually helped me discover that there is more to me than my failures. And that has changed everything. So that was the beginning. And it has been a journey, like I said. I continue to be on this journey, of course, and I continue to unpeel those layers to find the real me underneath. And in fact, all of those layers that were on top, and again, there are still layers to work through, but that actually became an identity that I had been believing about myself since childhood even. There were actually things that I can trace back all the way to my childhood. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. But what happened when I discovered that there is more underneath is that this gave me hope. Hope that I don't have to keep that identity. And change is actually possible. Very, very possible. Then recently, more recently anyway, I had the wonderful experience of being challenged by a coach. Her name is Lisa Canning. If you don't know Lisa, go look her up. She's amazing. And she asked us to do this timeline exercise. And what this involved was creating a timeline of all of the significant moments that you can possibly remember for as long, as far back as you can remember. And it was so interesting because I was so resistant to actually doing this exercise. I don't know why, but I kept putting it off. There was always something more important. I was just busy doing other things. It took, I think I finally did it when I got COVID. And then I finally took the time to do this exercise. And I am so grateful that she asked us to do this. I'm even grateful for having COVID because it gave me the opportunity to really dig deep, and actually get intimate, as in not being afraid to really look at my past. And then I had the opportunity to look back on that timeline and look for patterns in my behavior. And very often when we find these patterns, it probably means that we've decided something about ourselves, and it can stem from just one moment way back, and then it keeps coming up. And then that just solidifies what we're believing about ourselves. So anyway, so I discovered some overlapping patterns of people pleasing. Again, I mentioned that, but also anxiety. And it's so interesting that that anxiety was coming from the people pleasing because I had a fear of failing to please people. Interesting, huh? I find it very interesting. So, I saw these overlaps, and now I see that those patterns of my past, some of the people pleasing served me really well as I was growing up. I was like, in school, tell me what to do and I'll do it and I'll get the good grades. Does that sound familiar? Any of you encounter that growing up? I know at least some of you have, because I've heard that story many times. So, but that worked for me at the time, right? Well, when I got into college, I used that same pattern because it worked. And that might be when the anxiety really started, because I got so worried about, it wasn't about even doing it for myself, but I got worried about disappointing the professor. So as I look back on the timeline and I saw these patterns, I see now that these patterns of people pleasing and then getting so anxious about it don't serve me anymore. They don't serve me well, and they don't necessarily serve God well, and they don't let me love well. Because if I'm always trying to check a box or, make somebody happy, but not for the right reasons, then that is not loving them well. That's not giving them authentic love. So, remember how I said we were going to talk about why are we here? Well, here's the solution to this problem, right? Wanting to love well, but we have this fallen nature. There is a solution, and it all boils down to one word. You might be able to guess what it is. It's love. But not this kind of artificial, surface kind of love that has all of these ulterior motives and, thoughts about what's in it for me or anything like that. I'm talking about real love the way that God loves. So you may be thinking, of course I can't love the way that God loves. I'm not perfect. That's true. That is so true. And here's a news flash that you might not hear most places. You are not enough. By yourself, you are not enough. We hear that phrase, you are enough, lots of places, and I'm sure that it is well in, the intentions behind that are very good. But the truth is that you are not enough. I cannot love the way that God loves on my own. It's just not possible. But that is okay. And not only is it okay, that is a great relief to me, because I know that I don't have to be enough. And the reason for that is because there's a missing piece that is available to you and to me in every moment of every day that makes it possible for us to love like God loves. The tricky thing is that we all need to be ready to receive that missing piece. So, how do we go about this? How can we love the way that God loves? And what's that missing piece? So learn this simple equation, okay? It's very simple. If you can add, you can remember this. And it's not even tricky numbers either. Here's the equation. The real, unique, and unrepeatable you that God created and continues to create through your life, and He is working on fashioning you into His masterpiece. That you plus God's available grace equals everything that you need in any moment of every day to do God's will. You have everything that you need available to you. But unfortunately, that equation, although it's so simple, is so easy to forget. Some of us don't even know it. Some people don't even know that they have everything they need available. Or if we do know it, like I said, we often forget it. So here's my solution. This is why we are here. This is why. So did you catch that? The answer to the first question, why are we here? We're here to love. And we keep working on that perfection, reaching perfect love throughout our lives. And when that needs to happen before we're able to spend forever in heaven with God. But like I said, you don't have to be enough. You don't have to do that on your own. And there's just a few things to learn, to discover along the way that actually helps you grow in love. So that was the answer to that first question. Now the second question, why are we here in this podcast? And that is because we will walk through each of those factors of that equation. Technically, I know it's not a factor, is it? That would be multiplication, but we don't need to get into the math technicalities. But we're going to walk through each of those pieces in that equation and all of the obstacles that come up along the way. Because, life happens, right? And so how do you handle it when you fall short again? How do you handle it when something comes up and you're not able to follow through with what you intended? There are multiple ways to handle that. Some of them are really healthy for us and some of them are not. Some of them will cause more failure in the future and others will actually help us grow and learn from that failure. So that's some of the things that we'll be talking about in the future on this podcast. And beginning next week, we'll be talking about the masks that we wear. And I'm not talking about a piece of cloth over your mouth. I am talking about the invisible masks that we might not even realize that we're wearing. I'm talking about, we'll be talking about what they are and why we wear them, and also how you can remove those masks and give the gift of sharing the real woman that God created you to be with everyone around you. So think about that. If you could walk into a room without those masks on and share the real you with whoever you encounter, think of how powerful that would be. Because remember, we're going to be talking about not only who is that real woman underneath all those ick layers, all the ick, but who is that woman? But also, how do we make ourselves available and ready to receive God's grace in any moment of every day, so that we have the equipment to do God's will at any time? And in order to be ready to do that, we gotta learn how to conquer the fears that come along with it. So that's all things that we're going to cover in this podcast. And first, a little bit of housekeeping. A few things that you can expect from this podcast. My goal is to be so authentic with you. As we are discovering the real you, I'm going to be doing my best to bring you the real me. And as you know, of course, sometimes that could be very messy and even kind of raw, as in, am I going to show up with no makeup on, my hair a mess? Possibly. That could happen, for sure. You're going to get the real me. Another thing that you can expect is that this podcast is going to be very faith-filled. I have noticed along my journey that Jesus has called me to conquer my own fears of failure and step out in faith. And what's really beautiful is that he's calling me out of my comfort zone all the time. And so my need to completely lean on him just continues to be bigger and bigger. It's ever present, and that is where every episode is coming from. I know that I can't do this without his help. And so because he's called me to do it, I am noticing that I may have fear, and I'm choosing to act anyway. I'm choosing to lean on him and step out in faith anyway. So you can expect that every episode is coming from a very faith-filled place. Another thing you can expect is that this podcast will be very intimate. And what I mean by that is, as I've mentioned before, I'm showing you my heart. I'm showing you my journey. And like I said, I'm very much still on this lifelong journey with you. And I've just learned a few things along the way. And it's my honor that I feel called to share it with you. And I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for that opportunity. So, also, my goal for this podcast is to show you what's possible and encourage you and give you hope that wherever you are on your journey, whatever circumstances are present in this season, whenever you're listening to this, whatever circumstances or storms you are experiencing, you can have the equipment to do God's will in any of those circumstances. And what is God's will? That goes back to the very first question. Why are we here? We're here to love like God loves. So, when you know that you have the equipment to do that, and you know how to access that equipment, then you really can live your life very differently and not get so caught up in the circumstances and focused on the storm around you, because you're keeping your eyes focused on Jesus. It is so incredibly powerful. So I will be here every week to help you do that. Even if that means the occasional messy hair, no makeup on, whatever it is. Like I said, I'm giving you the real me. And very occasionally, even if that means that there may have to be a pre-recorded episode thrown in here and there, just so that I can be more present with my family if something comes up with my family. I am very excited about the topics that we have coming up. I already have probably half the year sort of mapped out, and along with those, I want to know what you want to hear on this podcast, because my goal is to serve you. If I am just talk, and it's not serving you, it has less value to me, because that's my number one goal, is to be here for you. So, and along with many of those topics that I have, I also have some guest interviews in mind. So watch for those, because those are going to be really incredible. Now, here's where you come in. If you are excited about this new podcast and all of the possibilities ahead, then the best way that you can support it right now is to leave a comment with either your favorite takeaway from today's episode or a question that you would love to see addressed in a future episode. It's that simple. Just leave a comment. No big deal, right? So do that right away, right now, before you forget. And I will see you next week. I am so excited for that. Next week, like I said, we're going to be talking about the masks that we wear. And I have another piece of housekeeping that I just remembered. Normally, this podcast will be aired directly on YouTube. Today, I wasn't able to get that connection set up, but it will be on the Women Created and Called YouTube channel. And so you can find it there every week. And I will probably also be streaming it onto the Facebook page here. So I'm excited to see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon. God bless you and all those that you love. Bye.